Mike O'Keefe says his daughter was a brilliant 18-year-old who had it all together.
These are a couple of her trophies from cheerleading.
A star cheerleader in high school.
She has ribbons and trophies.
Yeah, they'd won for different things.
And a whiz at math.
She was a good student. She finished all her college calculus before she even finished high school. And she finished high school a year early.
But the numbers, Mike says, that were more exhilarating to Michelle, the 260 horses throbbing under the hood of her Mustang GT.
I remember she made me a deal. She goes, "Dad, if I can get my bachelor's degree in a year, will you buy me new rims for my Mustang?" And I said, "You know what, if you can get your degree in another year, sure, we'll spring for rims for your car."
Michelle juggled college courses in computer science with part-time work as a TV and film extra.
She goes, "Dad, I could work and I could do this every day if I want to." And we both encouraged her. I go, "Well, that's great, but why don't you get your school knocked out first?"
It was a cold February in California's Antelope Valley. Michelle and a friend were on the way to LA for an unbelievable gig.
On that particular day, her and her friend were set up to be extras in a Kid Rock video in downtown LA.
Michelle didn't want to drive the Mustang the 60 miles into the city, so she pulled into this park and ride lot off the freeway in Palmdale, parked under a light, and rode with her friend for a night with Kid Rock.
Michelle was so conscientious of her Mustang, she wanted to park it underneath the light stand there. So, to minimize any kind of risk of vandalism.
There's Michelle and her friend in the front row as Kid Rock performed. The production went into overtime, as they often do. By the time they returned, Michelle was late for class and still needed to change out of the rocker girl outfit she wore for the video.
At 9:22, Michelle was changing her clothes from that video in her car for her class.
They were running late, and the class was going to end at 10 o'clock, so she told her friend, "Look, I'm going to slip into my jeans. I'm going to head down there and tell the teacher what had happened."
Michelle's friend dropped her off and told Mike she saw her put the Mustang into reverse.
She assumed she was going to leave, and actually what Michelle had done was move from one parking space down to another to change out of these club clothes they were in for the part they were playing into, just typical student kind of attire.
And what her friend didn't see is that Michelle's car went into reverse, hit a planter, and came to a stop. And this was no accident. Someone had just blasted 4 9mm slugs into her face and chest.
I just couldn't believe what I was looking at.
Security guard Raymond Jennings was patrolling the lot that night.
Right around 9:30, I heard a car alarm go off. And as I started to walk down to where that car alarm was sounding, there was a gunshot. And subsequently after that, there was multiple gunshots. And I radioed in for my supervisor and told her I had shots fired. They patched it through to the sheriff's department.
What Jennings, an Army National Guard sergeant, found was a crime scene as bloody as any in Iraq.
When you approached Michelle, did you check for a pulse? Did you give her any CPR?
No, I didn't check. There was multiple gunshots to Michelle. I didn't think anybody would survive something like that.
When he saw her, he saw a faint pulse, and he saw her hand twitching. And how could a man that's been trained in the military, a trained infantryman, not instantaneously want to jump in and do CPR? His comment to the police was, "I didn't want to disturb a crime scene." That doesn't make any sense.
The only other witnesses, 4 people in another car smoking weed and listening to music. They reportedly heard the car alarm and what they call tapping noises. Over the next few weeks, LA Sheriff's detectives tried to piece the puzzle together with what Jennings could tell them.
I'll just tell you what I see.
That's Jennings in what detectives call a cognitive interview. It's a scientific way to help a witness recall crucial information they may have forgotten.
I thought she was a prostitute because of the way she was dressed, and then found out she was in a Kid Rock extra in the Kid Rock video.
He said his view was blocked by another car parked next to Michelle's Mustang, but the detectives' interest was piqued. They believed Jennings volunteered information only the killer would know, such as the order of the gunshots and the trajectory of the bullets.
When I first seen her, the gunshot in her chest, that to me looked like the very first shot that was fired. It was just close range. It was very close range.
And he gave chilling details of how he says Michelle died.
Like her hand was twitching, just shaking like that, or just popping up and down.
Okay.
And then I seen you can see a slight pulse in her neck, just it's real light. I thought she was still alive.
Jennings was so helpful, investigators wondered, how does a security guard know so much about a shooting he says he didn't see?
When you were talking to investigators afterward, did you ever at any point think to yourself, I better stop talking or they're gonna start looking at me?
You know, I figured when I went home, I was like, I sat down and talked to my wife at the time and told her I think they believe that I did it.
He was right. Michelle O'Keefe had just returned to the Park and Ride in Palmdale, California after a night with Kid Rock, performing as an extra in one of his music videos. 18-year-old Michelle was in her blue Mustang in a cold, lonely parking lot, changing her clothes so she could go to class. Then, from out of the dark, 4 gunshot blasts ended her life.
Do you think Michelle would have put up a fight for her Mustang?
Oh, absolutely. She put up a fight. There's no doubt about it. She had a blow, which is like similar to a butt end of a gun on her nose. So there was actually a battle took place.
When Michelle didn't come home from school, her parents, Mike and Pat, instinctively felt something was horribly wrong.
I remember about 3 o'clock, I wake up and I look at Pat and she's on the edge of the bed weeping. And I go, what are you doing? She goes, Michelle's not home and I know something's wrong. About that time, the phone rang, and it was the sheriff's department. And I go, has there been an accident? And they go, well, not exactly. And I said, oh. And they go, Michelle's been shot. It just, a piece of me died at that point.
Was it a carjacking gone bad, a robbery attempt, or an assault that turned deadly? The key witness? The unarmed security guard patrolling the parking lot that night, Raymond Jennings.
I was thinking that she got shot in the chest and was trying to get out of there. And but when she put the car in reverse and was backing up, that's when the rest of the shots fired out. That's how I speculated.
Jennings sure was helpful. During his videotaped interview with the LA Sheriff's detectives, he led them straight to their suspect, himself.
Do you think you being so observant and so helpful is what made them hone in on you?
I do. I think that played a major role in my own demise for the most part.
But it would take 5 years before the Iraq War veteran was in custody on a murder charge.
At first I was confused. There was shock, I think would be the best word to describe it, being that I've never been in that situation before.
But did they have the right man?
There was no evidence connecting Jennings to Michelle's murder. No one identified him as the shooter. He owned a .38 caliber gun, but the murder weapon was a 9mm. There was no gunshot residue or blood on his uniform, and someone else's DNA was underneath Michelle's fingernails.
Do you think that Ray Jennings is guilty? Do you think he did it?
I think that if, at a minimum, he had to have been an accomplice because he just knew too much. He had an incredible amount of information that a minimum wage security guard doesn't normally have. He knew the angle of the shots. He was able to describe Michelle's death, how she passed away. And these are things you're only going to know if you're there. And so everything pointed to him.
Jennings told investigators he saw Michelle's car rolling backwards into a planter and then ducked for cover when he heard the gunshots.
You only worked there as a security guard for a short time, but did you notice people coming to the parking lot to hang out, do drugs, other type of crimes?
I never noticed any of that myself. I mean, it was a very active parking lot. There are cars coming in and out of the parking lot at all times of day and night.
Prosecutors believe Jennings approached Michelle's car with flirtation in mind, but ended up killing her instead. Jennings has always maintained his innocence, but he soon faced a murder trial.
Because of pretrial publicity, the trial was moved to the downtown LA courthouse. The first jury deadlocked, a mistrial declared. Then a second jury deadlocked, another mistrial.
I didn't think that they would convict me. Based upon the evidence and what the state presented, I didn't believe that they presented a strong case to convict me.
But when the third trial was moved back to the Antelope Valley, where Michelle was from, Jennings was scared.
I was extremely worried, and due to the fact of the media attention that the case had drawn, it was very negative towards me in a sense, and I didn't think I would get a fair trial up there.
The verdict? Guilty of second-degree murder. Raymond Jennings was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison.
How did that hit you?
Man, well, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I just remember picking up the phone, and the one person I called was Granny.
How do you tell Granny you got 40 years?
Well, she was crying. I mean, she was hurt because as everybody knows that knows me, they knew I wasn't responsible for this young lady's death.
The detectives, prosecutors, and the jury all thought otherwise. But as you're about to learn, it was all a huge mistake. The prisons are filled with cons who claim they're innocent.
I sit here as an innocent man.
And Raymond Jennings is no different.
I'm at peace in my life. And I laugh and I smile because I hold no remorse because I didn't kill your sister. That is the bottom line.
A dramatic moment in the courtroom. Jennings is defiant as he's sentenced to 40 years to life for the murder of Michelle O'Keefe.
I don't ask any mercy from this court because I know I don't have any coming. I will take my time and I will hold my head up as a man. My 5 children will know who their father is and they will know he is not a murderer.
But that's not what the state says. Jennings resigned himself to life behind bars, posing for pictures with his fiancée in front of a fake tropical background and watching TV with the other inmates.
The crazy thing is, most prisoners love to watch crime stories. Even Crime Watch Daily, people watch that on a regular basis in prison.
It was a news story about Michelle's murder that would be the key to unlock the cell door. And the man holding the key? Just some bored guy surfing the internet.
My son Clinton came to me. I guess what had happened is that he had been randomly surfing the internet and saw a link to a television program, and it was about an Iraq War veteran who supposedly murdered a girl in a parking lot, and he wondered to himself, why would that happened?
Attorney Jeffrey Ehrlich says his son, a foreign policy expert, was intrigued enough to investigate the Jennings case and concluded he was railroaded.
He went online and looked up the Court of Appeal opinion in Ray's case. And actually what he was hoping was that it would sort of show him that Ray was guilty and then he didn't need to think about this anymore. Instead, he read the opinion and it raised a lot of questions in his mind. And he came to me the next day and said, if I have found an Iraq War veteran who is wrongfully convicted of murder and who's innocent, would you like to try to get him out of prison?
Ehrlich, a prominent civil attorney, isn't a criminal defense lawyer, but he became one overnight.
When you saw the evidence, did you think that Ray Jennings killed Michelle O'Keefe?
It was just the opposite, that the deeper we dug into the case, the stronger our conviction was that he was clearly innocent.
Jennings was convicted despite no physical evidence connecting him to the murder. He just happened to be the parking lot security guard who discovered Michelle dying in her Mustang.
The state's entire case against Ray at its most fundamental level was he was there and there was no one else there that could have committed the crime, therefore he must have done it.
But Jennings wasn't the only one in the parking lot that night. Remember, there were 4 other people hanging out in another car nearby getting high.
The state knew that he wasn't the only one there. A person that has been since identified, that we'll call him John Doe number 1, who was a convicted carjacker, a gang member, who had done home invasion robberies, and who used a 9mm pistol, which is the same kind of pistol used in the killing.
And according to court papers, 4 months after Michelle's murder, John Doe number 1 was busted for carjacking a Mustang. When he was arrested, he was wearing an earring matching the description of the earrings Michelle was wearing the night she was murdered. And one of those was missing.
The case really had no validity, and so the state tried to make up for that by just heaping on piles of irrelevant matter. And so we just sort of peeled an onion and showed piece by piece how none of it hung together and none of it made sense.
The Los Angeles District Attorney's Conviction Review Unit looked at the new evidence, and they agreed.
Our office no longer has confidence in the conviction of Mr. Jennings. What we're saying is very, very clearly that if a jury was in possession of the information that we're aware of now, they would not have convicted him.
A judge ordered Jennings' immediate release. After almost 11 years, he was free.
You're a free man. How does it feel?
It's overwhelming. It feels great. I think there's no words to actually describe that.
But he wasn't off the hook yet. There was still one final day in court.
The judge vacated the sentence and dismissed all the charges.
3 weeks ago, a judge ruled Jennings factually innocent, meaning he was right all along. He didn't kill Michelle.
I just breathed a sigh of relief. I exhaled, and I was very thankful that it finally came down.
You spent most of your adult life in prison for a murder that it's now stated you did not commit.
Well, on one hand, there's a lot of anger. There's anger, there's bitterness. But on the other hand, I've learned from it. I've grown from it.
Ray Jennings is a free man. After spending 11 years in prison for the murder of Michelle O'Keefe, Ray was just released. The California court system admitting they got the wrong guy.
It's overwhelming. It feels great.
Despite the court ruling, Michelle's father, Mike, still believes Jennings knows more than he's saying.
Do you feel that Ray Jennings had something to do with Michelle's death?
I'm 100% convinced Raymond Lee Jennings was right there when this was all going on. Raymond Lee's a documented, prolific liar.
But is he a murderer?
I think he's involved in a murder.
Michelle's dad, Michael O'Keefe, thinks that if you didn't do it, then you had something to do with it.
I think it's the simple fact that Mr. O'Keefe has had, over the last 17 years almost now, seared in his head that I was responsible for his daughter. And the facts that I know of that the public is not privy to show that I had nothing to do with his daughter's death. And he'll have to come to that on his own terms.
Now Jennings is moving on from his decade-long ordeal, catching up on all those lost years.
You just got your passport, right?
Yeah, I just got my passport a couple of weeks ago.
What's next for you all?
Continuing to build our relationship, merging our families. I have children, he has children, and marriage. We've got a vacation planned to Mexico in May for his birthday.
Jennings says the trip to Mexico is just a prelude for a honeymoon in Tahiti.
Watch out, world, here comes Ray.
I'm coming. I just live it every day and just grateful that I'm allowed to walk freely.
But if Jennings didn't murder Michelle O'Keefe, who did? What about those other 4 people reportedly in the parking lot smoking weed the night of the shooting? Cops won't say who they're looking at, only that the investigation is continuing. And at the lonely parking lot on a hill, a cross marks the spot where she was murdered. A sad reminder Michelle's killer is still out there, lurking somewhere in the dark of night.